Hello, listeners, and welcome to Planet Sky FF, the world where everything will start revolving around £50,000 very soon. My name's Suj.
And my name is James.
Sky Fantasy Football will be opening soon. Basically, we don't know when.
It's a little annoying. No, we don't have a firmed up timetable or whatever. They've said to keep an eye out. The worst thing is, and this is one for the new listeners, they've asked them to keep a close eye on their social media accounts. I don't bother with that shit. There's never been a worse run social media account than Sky Fantasy Football's Twitter account. It's awful. It's run by like a 12-year-old. It has to be. They tweet things sometimes that doesn't make any sense for their game. Occasionally they put out captaincy polls. Say like you might have Aubameyang at home to someone, and they'll put out captaincy polls and be like, "Oh yeah, Salah, Jimenez, or Mane." Mate, we're going on fucking Aubameyang. What's wrong with you? It's just an example. So yeah, it's possible you won't even hear anything from their social media. It will just be, oh right, game's open. So we do think that we know the majority of the prices because these have been knocking about around a couple of websites over the last week or so. One of my patrons, I'll give a quick shout out to Scott Bailey, highlighted to me that it was posted on one particular website, and these prices look quite accurate. So I think, yeah, they're not finalised, but they're not going to be far away from where we think they're going to end up. Basically, there's not going to be mass changes. It gives us an idea. But the thing with Sky is, anyway, the pricing is a little bit irrelevant in terms of, obviously, you've got to overhaul. We think that's still going to be the same after game week 4.
Yep.
So you're literally only looking for a team for 4 game weeks. Therefore, it's not even only the fixtures that are critical, it's what days they're played on. So until we really know that, you can't go formalising anything for Sky, plus obviously transfer windows still open, etc. But the key message, I think, for the new listeners who might listen to the one, is it 2 weeks ago now, the intro pod? It was 2 weeks ago now, wasn't it? 2 weeks
ago,
yeah. Where we didn't really talk about kind of strategy and stuff is, the first thing is, do not think beyond game week 4.
Yep.
There's no point, because it's a forced overhaul wildcard period where you have to change it. You don't have to change your team, you can leave it. But we're all going to be changing our team at the same time. Looking further ahead than game week 4 is a waste of time. So those fixtures are absolutely pivotal. There's teams now who probably you just wouldn't look at, but they might have 4 great fixtures and you think, I might have one of them. I might find the talisman from that club for the first 4 game weeks or so. So even having an idea of the prices, we can go through some of them if you want, Suj, but it doesn't really matter till we've got the fixtures, essentially.
Exactly. And we were expecting the fixtures originally on Friday. There are rumours that they could come out a little bit sooner than Friday, as you don't think so?
That rumour's been deaded. So ex-West Ham United employee said he thought it was now going to be today, which I'd flagged to you because I was kind of thinking, well, if it's going to be today, we'll hold off till later in the day to record. Then he came back and said the information he got was false.
Right.
So I said to you last week when the Premier League said it will be no later than Friday, that's the Premier League's terminology for we're going to fuck it up to the last minute, and it probably will be Friday.
So we also know that when the fixtures are released, we should get at least some idea of the television schedule for the first.
I don't know if we will or not.
It's tricky to know, isn't it?
The thing is, this is different to an ordinary season. What we don't know is ordinarily what you get in a pre-season is you get the fixtures will come out sort of mid-June, and then towards the end of June, you'll get the TV fixtures released for August and September.
Yep.
And then before the season starts, you should get them for October and parts of November as well. So, in terms of planning wise, you've got mass periods. What we don't know at the moment is because of obviously fans not being in stadiums, the only people you have to inform the football clubs, and they're under an obligation to do what the Premier League says. You don't have to worry so much about police, staff in the football stadiums, etc. So if they want to give a Premier League team 2 to 3 weeks notice, like they do, say in April, to move a fixture, then that's what they'll do. Whereas, obviously, for supporters groups, it's kind of an unwritten rule now that they'll be given basically like at least a month, ideally 6 weeks, to understand travel arrangements, etc. That's not an issue. So if the TV companies want to leave it lastminute.com, That's what
They
they'll
can.
do. So I wouldn't expect when the fixtures come out on Friday, we have any information on TV fixtures as well. We might have something like Sky say, this is going to be the first weekend as a promotion, for example, and BT say, this is our game, something like that. But I don't think you're going to get the first full 4 game weeks. And that's all we need. That's all we need for the start, is to know what's happening in the first 4 game weeks. Then once we're into the season, we can worry about what's happening game weeks 5 to Christmas, whatever.
One of the things that's highly talked about at the moment is that both Manchester clubs won't be playing in game week 1, which is an FPL game week 1 potentially. And so the speed with which they catch up their fixtures is going to be interesting, because if they then still try and by game week 4 catch up, then there might be some very interesting Manchester United, Manchester City jump on, jump offs or 3-for-1s during that period as well. So
right at the start,
yeah. I think actually we have a question about that.
It's interesting. Do you want to read out the question? Just read out the question while you're on
it. It was Rob, wasn't it, that asked that question around this. So if you had knowledge that they weren't playing in game week 1, would you then use up more transfers before the overhaul than you had planned to get them in? Do you think that there's value in that potentially?
I set up badly for my first team pre-overhaul last season, but then I also didn't have a Scooby-Doo with what I was doing.
Yeah.
And I had a preset idea that I wasn't going to make any transfers in those first 4 game weeks. I was just going to leave it as dead, manage my players around the possible captaincies in the first 4 game weeks or so. That went after day 1 because Alisson got injured and I couldn't leave that dead for 4 game weeks. So I obviously brought in Edison. And at that point, having already used 1 more than in my head I wanted to, I was like, nah, I ain't doing anything here. So I missed things like Aubameyang for Arsenal against Newcastle on the Sunday in game week 1 and Burnley on the game week 2 was a really obvious one to go to for 2 game weeks on and off, take advantage of that. But I was like, no, I don't know what I'm doing. And that wasn't really a bad philosophy. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm going to wait. Whereas this year now, I'll know. So, I mean, if Man City aren't playing, for example, till the Sunday in game week 2, and I can get 2 fixtures of someone else beforehand, but then want to get into Man City because they've got good game weeks 2, 3, 4, then I'm going to be making moves pre-overhaul this time. Mm-hmm. One cautious thing is to say, yes, City aren't going to play in game week 1, but it's not beyond reason that they might play, say, on the Friday night in game week 2. And in which case, you might as well start with them. Mm-hmm. You're losing 1 game of someone else, unless it's an obvious right. I've got, I don't know, let's say, for example, Aubameyang's got Fulham at home in game week 1, and then suddenly he's going to Liverpool in game week 2 and Manchester United in game week 3. You might think, right, well, I'm going Aubameyang for game week 1, captain him, boom, come off. Otherwise, I think I'd probably just start with whatever I wanted from there, at least 1 anyway. Because you're going to want something. You're going to want something for that Friday night if they're playing on a Friday night, aren't you?
But without the fixtures, obviously, it is a little tricky to
it's
know.
It's all hypothetical, and until, as I said, it's not even really the fixture; it's knowing the days as well. So in that case of City and United, we now think that in match day 1 or 2. Sorry, let me clarify that. They won't play on the weekend of match day 1. In theory, they could, because of this 30-day rule, they could play in the midweek between match days 1 and 2. It's complicated by a couple of things. One is it's the League Cup second round. So all the teams that haven't qualified for Europe from the Premier League will play that midweek. And obviously Tottenham have a Europa League qualifier in that midweek as well. Now, there's also a predetermined agreement amongst Premier League clubs that the top 6 from the previous season will not play each other in game weeks 1 or game weeks 38. It does open the possibility, though, for Arsenal to play Manchester City or Manchester United in game week 1 because Arsenal finished outside the top 6. And obviously, having qualified for Europe, they won't be playing. They're free that midweek. So there is a possibility that if it's Arsenal against Man City or Man United, then it could be in that midweek between match day 1 and match day 2. That's a possibility. And that wouldn't surprise me because the Premier League do want a high-profile game on match day 1. And the most high-profile fixture they can get right now is to pair Arsenal up with a club that finished in the top 6. They won't be paired with Tottenham. And they won't be paired with Chelsea because they won't want that as a London fixture in game week 1. that's almost a certainty. So I think there's a strong possibility that Arsenal in game week 1 would have one of City, United, Liverpool, or Leicester. Is a strong possibility. So I think there's every chance you could have Arsenal match day 1 against City or United in the midweek when there's the League Cup fixtures. I think that's possible.
While we go through some of these Twitter questions, James, let's just do it. Benny Blanco, he wants to know how to ensure that I use my transfers this season. I haven't figured that one out yet, James.
Right, so Suj is really slack on this game. I genuinely, I'm not joking to you, I'm going to WhatsApp you every day.
Okay,
every day there's a game.
And this is what's going to happen as well.
You're going to forget.
No. I'm going to give you my username and password.
I'm not sure. Can we have this? We have this as an offline conversation?
Yeah. And should I win, and should you be responsible for having to go in to make my transfers for me more than once a month throughout the season, you can have 20% of the winnings.
Fuck you, right? if you win Sky,
I'll choose the transfers.
I'm having 20% anyway. Listen, if I win Sky, you can have 20% of mine for like putting up with me for a season.
That's a deal, and we've heard it here.
Why if I just make this deal? This is definitely a bad deal for me.
Contract is in the post. We have a lot of listeners that have just right. James and I are in it together now.
James might have just done himself out of 10 grand now. Suj definitely hasn't done himself out of anything.
Yeah, you never know. Same goes for the cup, by the way, as well. That £1,000. Moving on.
200 quid. About 3 hours in a pub, mate.
Yeah, probably. Right, Matt, clean sheet wipeout. New to the game this year, and that's thanks to you guys. No problem at all. With the prices not revealed, are you expecting Sky FF to have made the pricing structure more difficult than FPL have done this year?
No, essentially. If these prices come as what we expect, there are a few that are standouts as, they're going to be a bit too cheap here. A lot of the difficulty with Sky is, one of the gripes I had on Monday's FPL podcast was I think a lot of the FPL pricing is too low. Mm-hmm. If there's something I could change about Sky, it would also be similar to this. Again, I would make prices higher. The more difficult the game, in my opinion, the better for the players who will be into the detail and planning over and over again. The more cheap players there are, the more chance there is of someone winning the game who can win it on the first season. Sorry to say that to the new players. But the harder the game is, the better, I think, for someone like me. So I would bump up a lot of these prices and what I'm expecting to see. I mean, a perfect example is Aubameyang, and I mentioned this a couple of weeks ago, that he looks like he's going to drop in price. And he's an obvious talisman from Arsenal. Because they're in the Europa League, he's going to play on so many Sundays as well. It just looks like obvious. Mikel Antonio on these prices, if they turn out to be true, he's still rated as a midfielder and he's going to be around about 8 million. Now, a lot of people are going to steam into that if West Ham have got good opening fixtures, I think. Just go, right, well, yeah, it's him. He's out of position. He's playing up front. He's in that price bracket with midfielders where you are drawn towards that value of, I think, sort of 7 to 9 million. Christian Pulisic was 10.1 million last year. Looks like, if this data is correct, 9.1 million this year. A 1 million drop, in spite of the fact we've now got a year's worth of information on him. And we know that he's capable of being a talisman for Chelsea. And he had a brilliant end to the season. That doesn't really make sense to me. At 10.1 million last year, he was nobody's asset. At 9.1 million this year, he might be everyone's asset. So some of the pricing, I think, is wrong. De Bruyne, he's going to be probably 11.5, which being the same price as FPL should probably ring alarm bells. Same with Aubameyang's Sky price is highly likely to be lower than his FPL price. That should instantly be ringing alarm bells to everybody. Why is his Sky price less than his FPL price? Why is that? Because remember, your average price of a player in FPL is about 6.6 million. In Sky, it's 9.1 million. So that really should be ringing alarm bells. Aubameyang is, for me, he's going to be in so many teams because if Arsenal got good fixtures, the obvious one to cover it off as well. Proven as well. I think people know now that whether he plays on the left up front doesn't really matter.
Shooting shooting tier points potentially off him.
Martial, best player after lockdown, 10 million.
Cheap.
And for Sky, if that's what it is, it's cheap. Danny Ings, 9.9 million. Oh, suddenly I can now fit in Aubameyang, De Bruyne and Bruno Fernandes with this if I want as well, and Van Dijk and not have too many troubles. Yep. So
in Sky, it's worth noting that Martial outscored Marcus Rashford last year. I mean, both were strikers in the game, but they were very similar, but at one point in it, he was the top scoring Manchester United player last season.
Yeah. He's really stepped up since that lockdown period and he is integral with United specifically, that all those components are in the team at the moment. Because again, I spoke about this Monday, every time they make a substitution, the team is worse if they've got injured players, unless they buy Sancho or others, then they're going to be inferior if they have to use any of their replacements. But if all of that front four plus Pogba and Matic are all playing, then that's strong, right? We know they're going to do damage. Just a case of, to be honest, even with that, it's already at the stage where you'd probably go, is it Martial or is it Fernandes?
Yep.
That's probably the call to make. And I think a lot of people will actually make the call that it's both. If these prices turn out to be correct. For me,
it'll be both. As it stands at the moment, I think I want both of those guys in my team, but obviously we'll have to see when the fixtures get announced. Ray, who says, just on my second season of Sky, I didn't know about passing points until the end of the season. So what will you line up quite differently to your FPL team, or have a certain set base of players, obviously price dependent, of course?
Yeah, I mean, what I do in FPL bears no correlation in Sky. I won't be one of these guys who you hear going, oh, well, I didn't captain him in FPL, but I captained him in Sky, or vice versa. No, if he's the best captain in FPL, and he's the best captain in Sky, be getting captained in both. There's not a doubt about that for that sort of thing for me.
There are a couple of small...
hedging your bets is not for me.
Yeah, there are a couple of small differences, but on the whole, the likes of Kevin De Bruyne, Bruno Fernandes, Martial, Trent, Salah, Mane, they're good assets in both games. So I can see myself having KDB and Bruno and Martial and these guys in both. VVD is a real standout where he's much better in Sky
the one
than
I was
FPL.
going to say. Trent,
he's the first Liverpool defender on the team sheet.
Well, yes,
Trent for me.
Absolutely, that's correct. So, I mean, the first player in my FPL team is Trent, and the first one in my Sky team is Van Dijk. Mm-hmm. So, wouldn't have that correlation. It's understand the difference between the two games. And obviously, to go back to Ray's point, is Van Dijk. It's because of the passing tiers.
Yeah,
what makes it the difference. He's almost starting on 5 points for the majority of games for them.
Yeah.
So, throwing a clean sheet is 10 points. He gets an attacking return, you're possibly looking at 20 points with a man a match as well, right? So, yeah, Van Dijk the thing is, for the new guys, they're going to come in, and Van Dijk almost certainly is going to be the most expensive defender. We think probably 10.9 million.
Yeah.
And it's going to look like a lot when you're looking at it and you go, hang on, Van Dijk is like probably going to be about 0.5 cheaper than Aubameyang. You go, hang on, is that right? Yes, it's right. Yes, it's right.
You've got so another one that really stands out to me. You've got Van Dijk's 10.9. Let's assume he scored 268 points. Matt Doherty, okay, pronouncing correct.
The Doc, he's very much on my radar.
8.6 million, 179 points, and didn't play for large parts of the season as well. He could easily have been up there. Matt Doherty. So I see where Ray's coming from. There are quite a number of players that will be in both teams, but that's not because of anything other than they're good assets in both games as individuals, as opposed to...
We should just clarify and say they're on the dock, for example. That 8.6 million is the price that's suggested on this.
It's not
these internet posts. We don't know if it's final. What I actually hope is that with that sort of thing is that they panic and they listen to this podcast and go, shit, we need to make Doherty 9.6. Shit, we need to make Van Dijk 11.9. So I have no problem with coming out and saying, yeah, this is what I've seen. I don't have an issue with that. A lot of the players will be priced too low. Doherty at 8.6 will look great value. Where he's an interesting one, particularly the Doc, is he doesn't really pick up any of the tiering for tackle, passes, shots. Obviously, he doesn't pick them up. But consistency of Wolves, best team defensively from lockdown onwards, by far the best expected goals conceded record. throw in the attacking returns on top of him. 8.6, he could well be the kind of leaving their Wolves asset rather than Jimenez, for example. If you're looking for a Wolves asset, you go, right, I want one in there. It's going to leave it there. If that's Doherty's price, I suspect that's the way a lot of people, because of the way last season finished, will lean that way. He's very much of interest, Doherty. Doherty. I don't. Doc. Fuck it.
Phantomantle, a new player here. Do you guys use their app for transfers, captains, etc., or is it better to sign in elsewhere? I've never had a problem with the official FPL app, other than it not having as much information as the website. But wondering if Sky has any particular issues. Truth be told, I used the app last year and I didn't have any major issues with the app at all.
No, neither did I. However, the one stronger piece of advice I would give you is if you're waiting for, I don't know, let's say 12:30 p.m. on a Saturday is the first game of a Saturday, you can obviously change your team up till 12:30. Once you know that first team sheet at 11:30 a.m., don't wait till 12:25. Genuinely get it done. 11:45, 11:50, whatever. Once you've had your thought process moment, get it done. Don't leave it to a minute before the deadline, because we have heard, I didn't have any issues with it either, but we have heard issues, and this will particularly be a problem in the lead up to game week 1, we think, where there'll obviously be so much activity on the app that it's not beyond reason that it would crash. The reason I would always use the app rather than the desktop is desktop's not great on a mobile phone, and considering I will always be making transfers an hour before a deadline, quite often I'm probably going to be on the move, COVID, touch wood, etc. So I'm often making decisions only on a mobile phone, so I've just got used to using it. The app
it works fine, to be honest.
The app can be a bit clunky, but from that perspective, I've not had any issues from a transfer perspective.
Good. Joe Finley, Bather Amber Batman, has got a question that actually I'm going to open up to both of us. The original question is, what is Suj spending the 50 grand on? But now that we both know that it's 40 grand each as opposed to 50 grand.
Cool.
What would you spend the 40 grand on if you won it?
Probably trying to wager with you for the other 10 grand back, mate. What would you spend it on? Oh my God. I don't know. I don't think like that. I don't know, what would I spend it on? It's probably more, am I going to tell her or not? I think it would be that, to be fair. It would be house stuff and generally Harry
honestly,
and that.
I feel like, yeah, exactly. I was going to say you'd stick it aside for, like, you know, savings pot or whatever for Harry when he grows up or whatever. It's kind of, it's enough money that you could buy one or two nice things, you know, if you really wanted to maybe upgrade your car or whatever. But it's not enough money that it's like lottery money, is it? So, because if I won the lottery, I'd a completely different ball game. I would disappear if I won the lottery. I would erase myself off this planet and just go and live in a hammock somewhere. But 50 grand, 40 grand, whatever it is, I think clear down a little bit of debt here and there, do something for the house, whatever. So, yeah. And actually probably invest it in the biggest and best FPL podcast in the world.
There is that as well, but you're the boss, so that's up to you to do that. You haven't said what you'll be spending it on. Are you just investing in Planet
that's
FPL?
What I'm investing. No. I'm not Planet FPL, mate. WGTA.
Sorry.
Yeah, I'm going to invest.
WGTA.
They're the best. I said the best FPL podcast, not us, mate. We're just chatting. I was going to say a poo word there. Nah,
to be fair, while you mentioned WGTA, who got the assist, they are worth bringing into the conversation, because on our Patreon pod that we're doing later today, we're focusing on Tom Cantle's talisman theory.
Correct.
And although it's obviously going to be the Patreon podcast, and obviously Tom's article is very much focused towards FPL, the theory behind talisman theory is extremely important towards Sky. Extremely important. So that's basically the idea of having the best player from Club X, not being frightened to have the best player from Newcastle rather than the 5th, 6th best player from Man City, for example.
And we've seen that with the Man of the Match awards quite often going to the talisman, Jimenez or what have you, when maybe he wasn't the best player on the pitch. So that's why it has even more of an impact in Sky sometimes, because of the Man of the Match points that get awarded as well. Let's keep it moving. Benighted says, new to Sky this year. I love the fact, honestly, James, I love the fact that so many of these questions are people that are coming to Sky and then new to Sky.
It's what we wanted.
Good. We're going to have some fun with it. So, new to Sky this year. Do you find it difficult to separate your FPL and Sky squads? For example, do you ever avoid having the same player in both? etc.
Do you want to get your cough out?
Well, it's out now.
Just confirm that Suj hasn't got it.
So.
No, there's no correlation to what I do in FPL and Sky.
Yeah, I agree with that as well.
Two different games completely.
But as a counterpoint, I do think it will take you a couple of months to adjust to the differences. You can read the rules as much as you want until you're in the moment of making the decisions. So this season, I'm going to find it much easier to separate the two games because I have a much better understanding of Sky. Whereas you have to shake off those FPL cobwebs and biases that you have when you're looking at Sky, and it won't happen overnight. Things will happen in Sky that wouldn't have expected to happen.
I think people need to see the visual things to say, oh my God, my goalkeeper got 11 points for just a bog standard clean sheet there. Like, how did that happen? People need to see the visual to then understand the impacts that certain maneuvers can have on their team. And I think then it's probably as well, the understanding of the Sky game, the importance of transfers is obviously huge. The timing of them, what you do, why you do it. So it's probably only as well once you start having successful and unsuccessful transfers, it's probably only at that point you begin to get an understanding of what works and what doesn't. Doesn't mean that if you have an unsuccessful transfer that you necessarily did the wrong thing, by the way, or vice versa. But it's probably not until that point that you have a greater understanding of what you're doing. And there's obviously, I didn't really make any transfers to about November. I was well out the loop.
Yep, exactly. And stay at home, Cy Smith says, new to the game, basic question, where do you start? And how many weeks are you picking your team for? Do you plan out transfers from game week 1? So the second half of that we've talked about with I'm assuming you're an FPL player there, Sky. So if you think about your wild card in Sky, you are forced to use your wild card after game week 4. So in order of your planning, you're literally planning for those 4 game weeks, and that's all. And where to start, we did a beginner's introduction to Sky podcast last week. So have a listen to that. And that's a great place to get your head around the rules a little bit. And we run down the nuances between FPL and Sky. And yeah, there are other podcasts available out there as well. There's a growing community of content creators in Sky who also add their take on it as well. So well worth listening.
Yeah, shout out to Andrew, Dan, and Paul at Hub and Joe and Luke at Sky.
Yes.
Do great stuff for the game as well. There's plenty of good FPL players who quite quietly play Sky as well.
Mm-hmm. Right, we've got FPL parking the bus. Tough without prices, but if you had to guess, who will be closest to a Burn or Gilbert type this season? Basically super cheap and playing. Good
question. So on the Patreon Sky pod we did 2 weeks ago, I suggested that I thought it might be Tariq Lamptey at Brighton. Now, on these prices that have come out, he's coming in at 6 million, which feels a bit too much for that. The one that stood out, and it could be, is your boy Suj.
Ben Johnson.
Ben Johnson at West Ham.
Mm-hmm. I had him in my mind as the first name that came to my mind from the current Premier League teams was Ben Johnson. And then the second thing was someone from a promoted team who we don't know yet.
Yes.
That's the second lot that might be cheap. Ben Johnson.
If it's just going to be for the first 4 weeks, another name to watch out for might be Luke Thomas of Leicester, who's 4.6 million. If Chilwell's move goes through to Chelsea and Leicester don't buy, and obviously bearing in mind the transfer window's open to October the 5th, Thomas at 4.6 could be interesting. But the problem with that is, this is a good example of a problem. You buy Thomas for 4.6, you think, yeah, he's going to do me for the first 4 game weeks. September the 12th is the first game of the season. Leicester haven't bought anyone. And September the 15th, they go and spend 20 million on
transfer windows open until October, right?
You've got to be a little bit conscious of that. And then, therefore, from that perspective, I would more likely, rather than looking at someone who, these guys like Thomas or Johnson, who we think are probably going to come in really cheap, I would probably more look, rather than a combination of, say, that and a Doherty, for example, I might look more at 2 players at around about 6.5, just a bit safer. I think, right, that's locked. Your fixtures are okay for the first 4 game weeks. I'll go with that. So, if there's anything where you think, oh, that's good, but they're possibly going to buy, Ruben Vinagre at Wolves is another one who everybody in the FPL community has been going a bit mad for. And it looks like this morning it's kind of come out that they're trying to get one of 2 left backs to come in this season. So that's suddenly going to put a different amount of pressure on him. So you've got to be conscious of that sort of thing, that actually even when you start, you might not have all the information because that transfer window is open until October the 5th. It's worth saying we don't know that after game week 4 will definitely be the overhaul deadline, but it is international break after that as well. And that's commonly what they do. So it does seem to make sense.
Another one that got some minutes at the end of last season due to injury, so we'd keep an eye on, would be maybe Jack Robinson at Sheffield United. He's pretty cheap, but I think
it's not first choice, mate.
No, but if there's an injury or somebody's out for a little while, a Basham or what have you, then he's one to consider. But that there's a lot of ifs before he becomes someone that might be worth considering there. Cool. Should we?
No, I wasn't going to say anything. No. Crack on, mate.
We have Fantasy Football Ninja, SS Rich. How we doing? What did you learn from pre-overhaul period last year that you would apply to this year?
Yeah, definitely.
Transfers are okay
what
to
I
use.
said. Yeah, that will with Aubameyang. So he had. I'm just trying to think who I would have had that I could have moved out. But basically, Aubameyang never played till the Sunday in game week 1, and he played on the Saturday in game week 2. There absolutely should have been a move to go and get him in because it was the best captaincy on that Sunday and it was the best captaincy on the Saturday. And what I decided to do was take I think if I'm right in saying you could have, I think it was Manchester United would have played on the Monday of game week 2. So you could have dipped in and gone from United and back and forth, something like that anyway. But Aubameyang was the best choice, game week 1, game week 2 on the respective Sunday and Saturdays. And I should have definitely gone and had it. I'll tell you what it was. It was Harry Kane. Harry Kane had Man City match day 2. And he really should have been in and out Aubameyang and Kane. Because I think you could have had... Kane obviously played Villa on the game week 1 Saturday, captain. You could have gone Aubameyang for match day 1, 2, missed Kane against Man City, had Aubameyang's match day 3, and then gone back for Kane against Newcastle on the Sunday. Now, Kane admittedly had blanked against Sunday. But that's the perfect example of you're getting 3 fixtures of a very good asset versus the Harry Kane 1 fixture away to Manchester City is the perfect example of the sort of time that you should be making the move. And I was preset in my mind, I'm holding transfers back. The other thing is in terms of the further longer term picture of this, and we'll talk about this actually, it'd be worth listening for the Sky Players next Monday's Planet FPL podcast when we're talking about chip strategy. And one of the things that we'll outline in that is the way that chips are going to be played this year looks like they're going to be very, very different because the idea of mass double game weeks at the end of next season is basically not happening.
Don't say any more than that. Don't say any more than that. Let's save it for that podcast.
So if you want to know more, the fucking Sky Pod, man.
No, I just teasers, James. Teasers. How we keep the listeners.
It could happen
on their edge
because unfortunately with coronavirus, there's a lot of things that could happen. But
we don't know when next season's going to end.
The way the fixtures have been lined up, there isn't going to be mass doubles in like game week 37 and game week 34 next year. It's not happening. So using them earlier. Whereas last year, I really thought the way I manipulate blanks and doubles, I really thought that was something I could take a massive advantage of. That's why I kept saying to people on the restart, obviously it was a massive advantage to have more transfers less than anybody else, but it didn't benefit me massively because I wanted the advantage of the extra fixtures, which is what the way the rescheduling works did not benefit me at all from what I was hoping to gain from it. And this year, there isn't going to be massive gains at the end. So what I am saying is, the idea of holding back mass transfers to the end for blanks and doubles, don't worry about it so much. The bigger period is probably going to be sort of January.
And the last question came in from FPL Norman Conquest, but we've talked about it already about manoeuvring game week 1 without Manchester City and Manchester United assets. Let's wait and see where their game week 2 and 3 fixtures fall and also who they have to play before we can come back to that. And I have no doubt, knowing our listeners as well as we do, that as we get the fixtures and as we get closer to game week 1, that question is going to rear its head again when we know who these guys are going to be playing. So we'll come back to that for sure.
Definitely.
So that's all the questions, James. All we need to do now collectively is get all the listeners to cross their fingers. We cross our fingers, and hopefully by the time we record the next episode of Planet Sky FF, the game will be open.
Yeah. I hope so. We will at least have fixtures.
Yeah, exactly. And that's half the battle. So if we get the fixtures and some TV fixtures.
I'd probably be surprised if the game wasn't open by this time next week. I think it's probably a case of they're just about ready to go. These leaked prices were messaged to me last week.
Yep.
So, and they're out there. I've seen people tweet the link for this on Twitter. So it's not a particularly big shock. It's easy to go and find out. If anybody wants to DM me, is like, where have you seen that? I'll DM you the link. It's a link that's freely available on the internet. Mm-hmm. I forgot what my point was going to be there. So sorry, mate.
Well, we won't. Maybe we won't have prices, but we will have fixtures next week.
Yes, definitely. I mean, at least then we can plot and say, "Oh, right, Fulham have got a good opening 4 fixtures." I mean, if that could ever possibly be a thing in Sky, but we might be sitting here talking about Alexander Mitrovic this time next week. I don't know.
Yeah, indeed, we might. As always, guys, thank you for tuning in to Planet Sky FF. We appreciate all of the support, and so nice to see so many new players jumping on as well. Make sure you stay tuned with us throughout the season on the Sky FF journey, because it is a lot of fun. If you want more interaction, we do have a Sky Fantasy Football channel in our Slack, which is available to all Patreons, regardless of whether you're paying £3, £8, or £14. So if you want to get some interaction there, do that, and there'll be some good Sky Fantasy Football players in amongst that community as well.
So very good, frighteningly.
So
I ain't even winning that Patreon mini league this year, mate.
It's patreon.com/Planet FPL. And a cheeky little reminder, if you sign up now before the 31st of August, you won't get charged for September. September is free for all patrons. I feel like we haven't shouted that for a little while, James. Anybody thinking, shall I sign up to Patreon or wait till September? You may as well do it now, because you'll get all of the additional podcasts, all of the additional content that we put out, access to the Slack channel, and you won't get charged for September.
That will include an additional Sky podcast every month as well.
Indeed it will. So there you go. Thanks for tuning in again. We welcome all your feedback and interaction on Twitter. But as always, guys, stay safe. Ciao for now.
Thanks, everyone. Cue music, please, man child.